Welcome back to Jewish World Weekly. Religious Jews, once rarely depicted in general media other than being utilized as brief sight gags, have become noticeably more visible in recent years, especially in a slew of TV shows. Now, there are critics who charge that their depiction in such programs as Unorthodox or My Unorthodox Life or the recent Rough Diamonds are more focused on portraying them as narrow-minded, chauvinistic, self-righteous hypocrites. It's a viewpoint of the observant Jewish community, which some charge is also shared by parts of the news media as well, pointing recently, for example, to the New York Times' critical coverage of that city's religious schools, a yeshivot. But there are also examples of more positive depictions of the religiously Jewish lifestyle, such as, for example, the critically acclaimed Israeli series Sheasel or the Netflix reality dating show Jewish Matchmaking. So in this week's Jewish Forum, we ask, are religious Jews being fairly portrayed in the media? Well, joining us from our Tel Aviv studio is Allison Kaplan Sommer, a journalist for the Haaretz Daily. Joining us from New York is Amy Klein, managing editor of the Jewish Journal of Los Angeles, and a journalist who's written for The Forward and JTA. And we have also from the States, Allison Joseph. She's the founder and executive director of Jew in the City, a nonprofit dedicated to changing negative perceptions of religious Jews. Allison Joseph, since you started your organization, I guess we have to assume you think there is a problem with the way religious or Orthodox Jews are being portrayed.
Yes, there is. Thankfully, it is starting to get better. You did mention Jewish Matchmaking, so there's finally some good Jewish media to talk about. I would also say that Rough Diamonds is more of a mixed bag for me. There's authenticity in the characters, but also it does steep in sort of general Jewish tropes. But we're making improvements. We still have a ways to go.
Right. Amy Klein. Amy Klein, I just want to get your reaction. And also, you've written, not uncritically, but certainly more sympathetic to shows like Unorthodox and My Unorthodox Life, which Allison Joseph's group has been quite critical of.
Well, I think it depends on what Orthodox Jews want from the media. If they want only unbridled enthusiasm and positive portrayals, they're not going to be happy, because that's not what makes for good TV. So I don't know if that's biased or what makes for good media and good TV, and that's to find interesting characters and sometimes the worst characters.
Right. Allison Kaplan Sommer, you work for a media outlet here in Israel that sometimes has been accused of being critical of observant Jews or religious Jews. I want to get your reaction to it. And maybe also you've written quite a bit about Sheasel, the Israeli show, which seems to be in some ways a bit of an outlier in this discussion.
Sheasel is an outlier, I think, because it's like a little cameo piece. It really puts a microscope on a specific family in a specific situation. It doesn't try to make general social commentary on the ultra-Orthodox world. It's about specifically these characters, and I think that's the reason why it's so beloved and it works so well, and it seems to have a great human reach, and everyone can relate to the characters, even though they don't happen to be ultra-Orthodox Jews. But I think you have to, in general, look differently and through a different lens on the material that comes out both in the media covering ultra-Orthodox world journalistically and in entertainment when you're in Israel, because in Israel, ultra-Orthodox Jews are not only a society, a culture, but they're a very strong political force, and what they want affects the entire society. They've got great power, so therefore they are scrutinized much more critically and take a lot more heat in Israel than they do, I think, abroad.
Right. Allison Joseph. So Amy made a point about if you're doing drama, you're looking for drama. And if you're going to do shows, for example, about women in the ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox community, yes, you're going to look for perhaps those dramatic examples of those who are rejecting that lifestyle, be it on shows like Unorthodox and My Unorthodox Life, which are based on real-life stories.
Yes, so the thing is that there are dramatic stories outside of people rejecting their way of life. Those stories do happen. Those stories do deserve to be told sometimes. But if you put in front of any other minority identity right now, it would be such an offensive framework, and that's the majority of what we see for the Orthodox community. So I agree, characters need to be interesting. There needs to be some story that drives the TV show or movie forward, but we can do things that where being Jewish is not the struggle. There are so many other minority communities that are saying, show me beyond the struggle of my identity, show me with some sort of human struggle. And I would say the same thing that the Orthodox Jewish community is looking for. We deserve to see proud depictions too. We deserve to see authentic depictions too. And sometimes the stories can be outside of people rejecting who they are.
Right. Amy, Allison, Joseph makes a point about a double standard, that perhaps depictions of Jews are sometimes harsher of the Orthodox Jews than you might find in other minorities, especially in America, ironically also sometimes often by Jewish creators themselves.
I don't agree. Look at Indian Matchmaking on Netflix. Look at all of the shows on the TLC channel about fundamentalist Christians, evangelicals, about Mormons, sister wives, etc. I think the struggle between what an individual wants and needs and what their religious culture is telling them to do, not necessarily the rejection, but the struggle, the battle, that's a very dramatic story. And I think it's told in many different shows across many different cultures. And so I don't think that a lot of these shows that Allison Joseph is so critical about are hit pieces on Orthodox Judaism as much as they're trying to show that dramatic struggle, just like we like to hear stories over and over again about love and romance, etc. I think people are interested in the conflict between individual will and a religion and people's need to belong to a community and belong to a religious community and fit in and feel that they're part of a godly direction.
All right, but Amy, before Allison Joseph's respond, I want to get Amy's response.
Well, I'm an avid fan of Indian matchmaking, but I don't think that the Indian community comes up very well. They come up very materialistic. The standards are, what a guy wants in a woman is basically setting women back hundreds, or feminists back hundreds of years. I don't think the Indian community is very happy with Seema herself. I love her. She's an interesting character, and I don't even think she's made any real successful matches. I did learn a lot about the community. I learned that there, she works in Los Angeles, she works in Delhi, she works in a lot of different places, and I learned so much about the community. Can I see past the stereotypes? Yes, because I know it's a reality show.
Right. Well, I just want to say we're not discussing the Indian community here.
I understand. I'm just trying to say, put Jewish matchmaking next to Indian matchmaking, and you'll see the Jews come off 1,000 times better in their show.
I want to get Allison Joseph's response here, because I think they're making the point. If you look at any depiction of other religions, I think, for example, you would think of Mormons with for example, the Book of Mormon, the Broadway show, and some shows, that there isn't any particular onus or a stigma put on Jews in some of these series. What's your response, Allison Joseph's?
Yeah, so my response is that Christians are not a minority group. There's 2.5 billion Christians in the world. We did an unofficial analysis of how many ex-Christian stories there are compared to ex-Jewish stories. While there's 66 times more Christians in the world than Jews, we were only able to find 5 mainstream Christian TV shows in the last 20 years, as opposed to a dozen Jewish stories. So when you put that onto a chart, considering how few Jews there are in the world, it is completely skewed. That's the first thing. In terms of the Indian matchmaking piece, I don't think that Indians are generally dealing with the tropes that they're too materialistic. My sense is that Indians don't want to be seen as only engineers or, Apu working in, some sort of like a, quick mart. The materialism thing, I don't think is a thing that community is struggling with. But Jewish matchmaking, as I think we're agreeing now, is a positive representation. The characters are not perfect. We're not actually looking for perfect characters. Human beings are complex. Human beings have foibles. The idea is there a story to tell beyond struggling with your identity? And what was not mentioned was the Black community, Hispanic community, Muslim community. Those examples did not come up because in recent years, those depictions have gotten better. The Muslim community was being depicted in large part as terrorists. They were annoyed, rightly so. And now there is a shift away from that continuous depiction. And for the Orthodox community, we would say similarly, yes, stories of people rejecting their faith exist. And also there are other stories to tell. And we'd also like to see depictions of Orthodox Jews where they're proud to be who they are.
All right. Well, I want to let Allison Kaplan Sommer respond to some of the points Allison Josephs has just made there.
I think that Amy made the point earlier that people are looking for drama. And I think that if you look in these, the Jewish Matchmaking or Sheasel or anything, there are stories that aren't only about religion. There are stories about relationships between parents and children and between siblings and, all kinds of wider community in the workplace, for example. And I think what makes them interesting and what makes these series different is the cultural context that they're working in. And again, I don't think that it reflects badly necessarily on religion that you show people who are having trouble with it or are struggling with it, and some people end up leaving and some people end up staying. In regard to the numbers that, of course, they're being represented negatively in greater proportions, Jews are such a tiny proportion of the world that when they're shown in any light, it's going to be out of proportion because they are such a tiny number statistically of the world. So I think whether it's positive or whether it's negative, Jews are going to be, portrayed as over in either way.
Amy Klein, I want to get your feelings on My Unorthodox Life, this reality show, because that has been a particular lightning rod of people on both sides of the debate, whether it's truthful, whether the Julia Hart, the main character, is in any way representative of either the Orthodox Jewish community or those who leave it.
Well, I think many stories have shown that it's not exactly truthful, including how she met her husband and how long she's been religious. And she does, I don't know any reality show necessarily that portrays, look at the housewives. I know we're not talking about them, but they do not do a service to anything that they represent. I don't think that Julia Hart represents anyone except herself. Okay. And the title, I guess, is sort of misleading. But back to Allison's point, I don't think that Orthodox Jews are necessarily portrayed so well in the media, and I'm not going to argue that everything that they are seen as is great. But if you want, I don't agree that it's a bias. I think that if you want more shows showing Orthodox people, you need Orthodox people writing shows.
All right, I want to get Alan Joseph's chance to respond. Amy's saying it's not a bias. It just may be the fact that perhaps you could argue the Orthodox Jewish lifestyle doesn't lead one into the entertainment business in order to make these shows.
The entertainment business doesn't accommodate Sabbath observant lives. We're working on that right now. We have a Hollywood bureau that we launched over a year ago. It's the only Jewish bureau, whereas every other minority group has had one in many cases for decades. A huge part is that they do not make space to accommodate Jewish observance, and that has actually precluded Jews who are Orthodox to be part of those stories. And also them greenlighting stories about proud observant Jews. That's another challenge that we're facing. I want to just point out the thing about people not taking TV literally. We had a Catholic Italian woman write to us to say that she was raised to love Jews, and watching shows on Netflix, My Unorthodox Life, actually turned her into a Jew hater. And by going online to see if there was more to the story, she found our website. She saw a more nuanced take to the Orthodox community, and she said to me, Netflix is endangering the Jewish community.
Right,
so I think that we have to recognize.
Okay, we'll have to leave it at that. To Allison Josephs, Allison, Kaplan, Sommer, and Amy Klein, thank you all for joining us on Jewish World Weekly.